Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in this beautiful world you might be. My name is Jack Branch. I'm located in Covington, Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. Yeah, we're getting over the boycott bowl and all the goofy calls in the NFL. It is gone. It is done. And today I couldn't be more excited about special guests that I have. A lot of us in our 40s, 50s, and people even in their 60s are wondering about these generations behind. They're like, do they really have what it takes? Are they really going to move the needle? Are they going to really solve problems, or are they just going to suck off the system? And back this summer, when I proposed to my bride now, Renee, there was a lot of acknowledgement for this young man that we're going to speak to today around, number one, how youthful he is, and number two, the mark that he's making in the financial community. So I'm really excited to bring on a new friend of mine. He's out of Denver, Colorado. He's originally out of Wisconsin, so everybody knows good stuff comes out of the Midwest, and that's my good friend Caleb Guilliams. How you doing, my friend?
Man, it is so good to be here. What a great intro. And I have to say, before we get going, the way that you proposed to your now wife it just brought a smile to my face, and I'll never forget that. So that was a highlight to experience, and it's just a pleasure being on your show.
Well, I appreciate you coming, and I'm very excited for you to share, to the audience. A lot of people may say, well, what is a guy that's 22 going to teach me that's 40, 50, 60 years old? And I think the answer we're going to go through today is really a few things that probably your financial advisor has no idea of even the concept. I've realized, and I know Caleb's realizing that, institutions, the government, the agendas of those entities is really what's hurting most of you all listening to my voice. And, so tell me a little bit about how you got in this business. A guy 22 years old, why did you get in the financial services industry as screwed up as it is?
Right. Well, a lot of people when they see me, they're like, "Wow, I didn't know a 15-year-old could, be in the financial service business." And the reality is this: I started out as working in a chicken factory. Like I literally, Jack, I gutted chickens and got paid $1 per chicken.
Wow.
And I'm someone that loves to work, was starting to make money, and it was awesome. Okay. So I was doing that. I was very passionate about how our money could work and passionate about leadership. And so I met a gentleman who introduced me to a bank that he was, on the board with. And at 17 years old, I started working as a teller. Now, I was that kid that was telling the CEO of the bank how he could run a more profitable business, because that's just how my brain works. And that opened up opportunities to go and network. I started working in our marketing department, but then I got to work in our investment department when I turned 18. And Jack, I thought I arrived because I had on my business card, Caleb Guilliams, investment assistant, and I was just on cloud nine. And then at the age of 19, the guy that was running our bank's investment department of these three small branches took another job. And at 19 years old, I ended up stepping into those large shoes of his, running that while going to school full time. And it was awful at the time, if you can imagine. But I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't have written the book that I've written. I wouldn't be meeting with people around the country if it wasn't for those opportunities. And I pretty much went on a 2-year mission. Said, I don't know crap about anything money-wise, and I'm going to go out and learn from the best. And so while I'm young, I feel like I'm an old soul because I've worked with people around the country. I'm in Birmingham right now, actually pretty close to you, with some good friends of mine who run the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast and their company, and I've just learned from so many people, and I feel so grateful for the amount of people that have poured into me. And now I feel like we have a responsibility to share with people some of these things that we're going to talk about. And I'm a firm believer, once you understand this, there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to take action. And that's where I'm at currently.
That's good. People just don't know what they don't know. And like I said, what I'm realizing is the whole system is just geared to market to people to keep them under the controls of these other entities. So working in a bank, which we all know banks are very profitable institutions. I mean, they don't give out
Uh-huh.
bank charters real easily. What was the biggest takeaway you got from working in the bank that said, man, I don't necessarily want to do this the rest of my life, to now where you are today?
Well, and that's a great question, by the way. Twofold. When I was working at the bank, I absolutely loved it, and I actually left there at the age of 21 to start my company on super good terms. The bank CEO is like a second father to me, even to this day. But I believed what I believed, and I didn't want to sit back waiting for someone to come to me. So that's why I left. Now, the thing that I really learned about banking is you're right. Banks are an incredibly profitable institution. And how do banks make money? They just control money at scale. And that was I didn't know that when I first started. Now that I teach people, one of the segments that we go through is how banks make money. And we have to start controlling money like the institutions that are already winning. And that's the biggest takeaway that I got from working at the bank, although I learned that almost after the fact. Then, sometimes the employees of the bank don't know how banks make money.
Oh, yeah, and how they loan money as well, correct? I mean, there's a dirty little secret that most people don't know, including people way up in the bank itself. And that was something that really was an aha for me. So there was a few things. I know you wrote a book, a guy at 22.
Right.
I've been on this journey to write a book. I've got this concept called the retirement myth. Tell people a little bit about this book and what inspired you to really write it.
Right. So the book is called The And Asset, The Secret Way to Save and Use Your Money at the Same Time. If you're someone that wants to get the book, you can go on to Amazon, but I would rather you go to andasset.com, and I'm pretty much giving away it for free, just asking people to pay for the cost of getting the book. The reason I wrote the book is there's so much confusion around the idea of how to get your money to start working for you. And there's a couple firm beliefs that I had about money and how it should flow. The first thing has nothing to do with money. It's everything to do with how we think about ourselves. Jack, you are your greatest asset. And I don't mean like you're like some god, but I'm saying if you're going to invest in anything, invest in yourself.
Right.
That's like a strong belief.
Yeah.
People
typically think it's their real estate or their 401k or take your pick. I mean, their business that they're building. And so when you make that statement, tell the audience what you truly mean by that.
I just truly mean if you're going to bet on anything, like bet on yourself. And the reality is people will come to me and they'll be making $50,000 and they'll say, Caleb, should I invest in a Roth IRA or 401k? And I'm looking at what they're trying to accomplish and I'm like, man, you got to make twice as much money. And that's a foreign concept, but the reality is how can we make ourselves most valuable? And how do we have a purpose and a why behind where we're going? Because so many people don't know where they want to go, and it's so hard to figure out how to be better with our money when we don't have a clear direction on where we're going. And so the first area is understanding the skills and abilities that you have and make sure that you have a why that drives you. And when those things are both aligned, don't devalue yourself in the way that you think about your money. And I'll just say this one other thing as it relates to that is so many people, when you look at what they do with their money, devalue themselves. They obviously are not valuing themselves as their number one asset when you think about what they're doing with their money. And if you could write a whole book and a whole talk around that aspect, and so many people would be way better off. And so that's like the first key point to my book.
Right. So it's funny when you say we are our number one asset, how few people really believe that. If you look in their checkbook and where they're writing checks, they're writing it to all these other entities and very little in personal development, very little in indemnifying or taking care of that asset. If you had a $5 million house in Miami Beach, you'd more than likely tend to that very well. But like you said, we find the consistent message is that most people don't tend to it very well because I just don't think they know or they really slow down to think about it. Right.
You know what I love about you, Jack?
Tell me.
You are very intentional with spending time with your family and Renee. And I know we haven't even talked about this, but I know your family is number one in your life, or it's up there. And another thing that I've realized is people are saying one thing, but what they're doing with their time and money is not aligned with that. And that's not necessarily their fault. That's why we're on a mission to help people. That's why I wrote this book. That's why you have this show. But it's helping people actually get the results that they want. And that's, for some reason, is a foreign concept in our business of financial planning or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So many people are money babysitters, and I stole that term from these guys without Wall Street, but it's this idea that they're actually not getting the result that they want.
Well, and not only that, but they get used to this poverty mindset and all these things that have been passed on from generation to generation, and trying to break out of that poverty mindset isn't an easy one. Although, I've seen and met many people that have broken out. So what do you think the difference in the one that gets stuck versus the one that can get out of that really is, if you had to put your finger on it?
Right, and the reason I start with the person is so many of our problems would stop if we valued ourselves, understood what we want, and went for it. But then you start making money, and what I've also realized is most people don't have a strategy or a process as it relates to their money. And so the book, while it talks about having the importance of a why, you are your number one asset, it really goes into 3 areas. And I'm a believer that if you can get these 3 areas, whether you have $100 million in the bank or whether you have $100, this is the roadmap to help you get to what you want and get the results that you want to start living. And it first starts with efficiency. Do you know how many people are losing money that they don't even know that they're losing because they're inefficient in maybe how they're purchasing things, how they're paying their taxes? They don't track their money, so money is controlling their life. And when I work with someone that's really clear on what they want, the second area is understanding efficiency, and there's 2 things that we're really looking at. The first thing is we're looking at areas that you're losing money, and then we have to talk about the opportunity cost of that dollar. And for everyone that's listening that just tuned out because I used technical jargon, opportunity cost is when you lose a dollar. It's not just that dollar that you lost, it's what that dollar could have earned you the rest of your life. And so we not only have to look at the inefficiencies, we have to understand that an inefficiency can really cost us big time throughout our life. And that's an area that I talk about. And then I don't know if you want to add anything about efficiency, because I know you and I both do very similar things.
Yeah, the analogy I use down here is in the oil and gas field and in pipelines specifically. If you have the inflow where money starts to flow in and you put a meter on it, it says 1,000 pounds per square inch. And then on the way out, downstream, it shows 500 pounds per square inch. What's happened in that pipe? There's obviously a leak. If it's in the deep water, they send a diver down with a welding rod and they, put that welding torch with the rod on it to seal that, to then hopefully get the flow out to match what's going in. And I think that's what you're really talking about is 100%. Not a lot of people are paying attention to that. They're finding the latest and greatest widget or investment scheme or yada, 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 versus really just trying to keep more of what they're earning.
Correct. You got it. I mean, I love that analogy. And so many people have leaky faucets or pipes. And if we could do one thing, it's just help them find money that they're currently losing. I mean, that's value right there.
Yeah, and I know you had mentioned this compounding effect. Albert Einstein said that it was a miracle. However, what's sad is most people never really get to experience the miracle. Talk a little bit about that, what you're learning, even at a young age, about compounding and why it's so instrumental in one's wealth.
Yeah, and Albert Einstein is noted for saying, if you do the research, I don't actually think he said it, but he's noted for saying that compound interest is the 8th wonder, and he goes on to saying, but he who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pays it. And it's kind of funny because if it's this amazing 8th wonder, Jack, why is no one taking advantage of it? It's really because we are setting ourselves up, we are investing and saving in strategies that are intentionally not designed to compound over our life. And what's separating those, there's 4 things, and if you're taking notes or if the listener's taking notes, there's 4 reasons why your dollar's not compounding. The first reason is every time your dollar gets lost, and mainly due to maybe a market crash loss or whatever, that dollar, you don't just lose that dollar, you lose what that dollar could have earned the rest of your life. Anytime you're paying an unnecessary percentage-based fee, you're getting penalized for more money that you're accruing, and that's essentially like a hole in your bucket. Anytime you're paying tax unnecessary, or if you're postponing or just kicking the can down the road, you're pretty much saying, I'm not going to take any responsibility over my tax today, and I'm just going to hope the government doesn't need more money. That's like a guarantee that you're not going to compound your dollar the rest of your life. And the fourth thing is the use. And this is like this messes with people, but think about it. If compound interest, what makes it so magical is it's a long-term passive strategy. And we always love to get the exponential curve that essentially takes time. And most people start cashing it out before they get that exponential curve.
Right, like a 529 plant, very widely marketed. You know, it gets right to that point where it starts to really compounding, take out, and then what do?
They cash it out.
Yeah, they cash it out, and the university gets to build that compounding, which is very interesting, you know, when you think about how and who really develops or markets these. And look, I've been a victim of that. I've done some of that, but then I've started thinking different, as Caleb's mentioning, to really put myself and others in control of the money versus relinquishing that control.
Totally.
And so, you know, I guess this is the big aha that I've realized over the last couple of years. What I believe is going to happen when the next correction happens is the guys that are sitting on those 1.5%, 2% fees. I think the public is going to wake up, and I think the public is going to say, "Look, I saw the Schwab commercial that said they would manage the money for 0.0000009." So why would I give it to this joker I see in Cabo all the time, you know, surfing and really not doing anything other than being a drag on my money? And I think that's a rude awakening coming in our industry. Wouldn't you agree?
I think you're right. I 100% agree. That's the beautiful thing about capitalism. We are going to get more and more efficient. And what I quite frankly say to people is, if you want to invest in the stock market, I'm not your guy. But there's this thing called Vanguard 500 index funds. And if you're sold that the stock market's the way to go, and in our process we really identify where you should be investing and how you should be using your money, then don't pay someone like me to put a drag on your money. And it shocks people because they're like, oh, wow. But like, I genuinely want people to live their highest potential. And that means telling the truth even when it's inconvenient.
And I believe really that's the big wake up call. You know, you got two emerging markets. You got the CPAs with the tax change that many people with the standard deduction being as large as it is won't actually have to use a CPA. Inevitably, they could go to irs.gov.
Right.
Not even have to pay a guy $300, $400, $500, and they're scared. And then you got the investment community that knows that this wave's coming, and they're scared. Yeah. Then you got guys like you and I that bring it on, right? I mean, it's like as long as you're doing the right thing with people and you're educating them, smart people can make great decisions if they have all the information. They just don't have all the information.
You got it, man. You got it. You know, information's power, but it needs to be information that's applied. There's a lot of people that are smart, that know a lot of things about a lot of whatever, that are not financially independent or not actually impacting a lot of people.
So talk about that fourth component, the power of control, that is so essential. Right. You know, we talked about first the and asset, you and I being our most valuable one, and to invest in that appropriately. So if we are the number one asset, why aren't we investing in us? Number two was efficiency. We talked about the leaky pipe. And number three, we talked about the compounding effect. It's either working for you or working for someone else. Usually it's for someone else. And then this fourth piece is about control. What's been the big aha for you around control that you've realized, even in your short stint? And I'm telling you, this guy is on his game. If you look at the old dogs that were at this trip in Florida, Caleb was way surpassing many of them. And you had a lot of these old characters scratching their heads saying, how can this guy be, you know, in the same room as we are? And so talk about this control aspect, because I know a lot of listeners want to know, they think they have control, but really they don't.
Right. The control aspect came out of a frustration and a dilemma that I had early on. And I don't know if anyone can relate with this dilemma, but I had this dilemma of wanting access and use of my money because I know that over the next 10, 15 years, there's going to be opportunities to invest and either in my business or other opportunities. But I also am like haunted by Einstein and this idea of our dollar compounding the rest of our life. And so I'm like, okay, how can we how can this work? And the idea of control is really based on looking at how institutions are making money. It's looking about how the people that are truly winning, they understand the source, they understand what drives them, and they understand that capital is king. And my book is all about understanding what's I asked a question in there, and do you play golf, Jack?
Oh yeah.
Okay, what's the ROI of a golf club? And what I mean by that is, okay, it depends on how good of a golfer you are. And so when people come and ask me, they're like, Caleb, what's the ROI of having access to my money over my life? The answer is it depends. Like for someone like you and me, it might be like when the market tanks, so like we're going to be happy because we have control over our cash and we're going to be buying investments on sale. Whereas maybe someone that has control over their money is spending it on, vacations, and it's not really helping them out. So I always kind of preface it with that's why you need to invest in yourself and be really clear on where you're going. But control is the number one aspect to our wealth. You look at all the institutions, they're giving us some kind of rate of return, but they want control over our capital. Why are they paying us interest rates, whether it's in Wall Street or whether it's in banks, for control over our money? Banks are the most profitable business in the world, and how much do they invest in the market? Zero. How do they make money? They control money way better than you and I. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's really profound.
money comes in the front door, right? They give
Right.
you a 2% CD, and they're loaning you for a boat or a wedding ring or a house,
Right.
and people use that simple mathematics. They say, well, if I'm making 2% and they're giving me money at 6, I'm really, they're only making 4, and that's where they failed that math class, is they're not really understanding truly how much the bank made and how these low interest rates, have really been beneficial for them, where they're making money hand over fist.
What's interesting is if you put $100 at the bank and they paid you 1%, which would be generous, then they loaned out that $100 to me and charged me 4. Most people would be like they earned 3%. The reality is, on paper, now there's overhead and all this stuff, but on paper, due to leverage, they earned 300%. That alone, it's like, okay, that's really interesting because their investment was the dollar that they paid you. But here's the deal. Understanding, you can have control, but it's really what you want to use your money. So a lot of my clients are business owners. A lot of my clients are investors that have specialized knowledge in something. And it's really, we look at what can you do with your money that can provide the greatest amount of value. So some of my clients do investing in the market? Absolutely. Although most of the people that I resonate with are like, no, I'm going to invest in something that I care about, or I'm going to put my money with my family, or something that they actually align back to their why. A book talks about the principles, but I actually give people the strategies and the takeaways on where to put your money, how to use it throughout your life, and how that can help you. I'm not a huge fan of retirement, but how that can help you create cash flow for the future. But being in control of your money today, while also taking the power of compounding and have it grow for the future. And it's nothing that I came up with. To just rephrase what you just said, I'm so grateful to be working with people that have poured into me. That's why I can be going to these conferences and talking to people like you, is because people believed in me and poured into me. And we could probably have a whole nother podcast session on just my generation and some of the beliefs I hold about.
Well, maybe we will. What do you consider a 22-year-old? It's not generation. It's not the millennials.
I think it's Generation Z.
Yeah, I think my daughter's in there. What's the ages? Like 15 to 22? It's a whole different mantra that and I hate to even stereotype, because look at you. You're an outlier in the data set. I mean, it really comes down to understanding your gifts, harnessing those gifts, and continuing to always learn. If you have that arrival syndrome, you might as well be put in the dirt.
Yep. And yeah.
And
huge. I could not agree more.
This whole retirement myth, I think our industry has created to get people to do exactly what they want them to do, which is chase myths about rate of return instruments that may or may not happen, and then to live off 30 to 40% because they were so frustrated working in a place. Why not be doing what you love to do and never stop that?
Yeah, here's a thought, and maybe it's because I'm ignorant and young, but so many people are like, okay, they use the retirement as a carrot. Like, they literally hate what they do, and they're like, but I'm going to stick it out 10 more years so that when I can retire and then do what I love. And I'm like, last I checked, we have one precious life on this earth. And I'm like, wow, that is very, like, maybe that's my ignorance, and I'm going to wake up and be like, wow, well, I was dumb. But, like, I just want people to live the life that they want to live, and it's so precious. And you have a better, way more perfect scenario with the people that you love. Like, we're not guaranteed a healthy life.
No.
And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about, but do a self audit of your life today and make sure that you're happy with the life that you're living, and that you're living with purpose, because that's way more important than money, being efficient, being in control. It's understanding that you have a purpose in your life.
When you figure out why you're here,
yeah,
it's not work ever again. And I know you found it at a very young age. It took me about 15 years longer. However, I found it, and I continue to find different aspects of it. So look, definitely go to theandasset.com. Is that right?
It's AND asset, ASSET.com.
So we're going to post a link. I mean, all you got to do is pay the shipping. So why not invest in yourself and pay the shipping and learn what this young man has created? Because I'm telling you, you're going to be blown away. Caleb, I really appreciate you taking some time today. I hope you all appreciate the knowledge and education. And that's how they could also find more about you as well, theandasset.com.
Yeah, my website is betterwealthsolutions.com, or you could just Google search my name or friend me on the social media. And I am here to add value. I believe we live in a value economy. I'll add one more nugget, because I love that you have a podcast, is smart people learn from their own mistakes, wise people learn from others. I'm just fortunate enough to learn from people that are humble like you and are willing to share the 15 years of experience, because that's why I'm able to do what I'm able to do. So if you're listening to this podcast, keep listening to it. Jack, you're incredible, and I feel so grateful to be on your show.
I appreciate you too, my friend. And I mean, that's the whole intention for this show is, to navigate through the valleys of life, both in health and in wealth. And what's the point in really paying attention to your wealth if you're not paying attention to your health, and vice versa? And no sense to be sticking money in accounts you can't figure out the returns or the use of it or the enjoyment of it. A guy once told me, if you have $10 million and you're in the desert, what good is it? But if a water truck drives by, then it has use. And
Correct.
that's what Caleb and myself are here. And if your advisor really isn't sharing these concepts and they're just sharing the magical product of the day, you need to reach out to Caleb or myself to get educated, because once you become educated, you then can make better money moves. And again, we're going to wrap up today. And again, Caleb, I really appreciate your time, and stay tuned till Thursday and next week when we have new guests coming on to help you navigate the valleys of life. God bless, and we'll see you on the next show.